As creator and writer of the multi-award-winning Chernobyl, it's fair to say that Craig Mazin knows a bit about telling stories. And while the showrunner of HBO's lavish adaptation of The Last of Us, currently showing on Sky Atlantic and available to stream via Now, was always likely to say as much, plenty would agree with his assertion that Naughty Dog's 2013 post-apocalyptic survival adventure is gaming's finest ever narrative. Its tale of a smuggler transporting a teenage girl across the US, in the belief that she might hold the secret to a cure for the cordyceps virus that has turned humans into fungal zombies, is certainly powerful and affecting. That's partly down to strong writing and first-rate acting from leads Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, but also Naughty Dog's bleeding-edge capture tech, which allows for more nuanced human performances. And therein lies the rub. What separates The Last of Us from so many of its peers has less to do with the parts you play as the parts you watch. That, of course, makes it particularly well suited to adaptation for the cinema or, in this case, TV. But does it make for a truly great video game story? Yes, the cinematics are unusually well scripted and performed compared to most other games, serving as a reward for surviving through tense stealth sequences, brutal shootouts and nerve-shredding pursuits. But it's hard to escape the fact that our role in the story is limited to pushing the characters from A to B, joining the dots of a pre-written plot rather than having any meaningful say in how events play out. HBO's The Last of Us will almost certainly stand as one of the more successful video game adaptations, albeit because it's adapted from a linear story that borrows liberally from the storytelling language of TV and film, rather than taking advantage of the medium's defining feature, interactivity. The most celebrated video game stories of recent years have been those that have experimented with narrative form and structure, and it's no surprise that the majority of these have come from independent developers. The award-winning Disco Elysium allows you to shape the personality traits and even the ideologies of a troubled cop, turning a murder investigation into an existential struggle. While the likes of Road Warden, Citizen Sleeper and Wayward Strand deliberately limit your time in their worlds, forcing you to make tough choices about which quests to take on and which characters to spend time with. And while two of the games that showed up frequently on 2022's Game of the Year lists, Immortality and Elden Ring, could hardly be more different in theme and form, both present scattered, fragmented narratives that must be pieced together in the player's head. Yes, there will always be a large audience for linear, spectacle-driven blockbusters such as The Last of Us or God of War Ragnarok. But it's the titles that afford us an active role in determining how their stories play out that surely represent the future of video game storytelling. We can't leave The Last of Us alone. After various re-releases and a full sequel, the premier PlayStation Post-Apocalypse returns almost 10 years after its 2013 PS3 debut as a live-action TV series from HBO. As the game was so clearly inspired by the neo-westerns and prestige telly of the time, it's a form that fits like a glove. Walking a fine line as an adaptation, it hits those pivotal, oft-replayed beats with aplomb while also introducing just enough new to keep longtime fans guessing. It's an approach that makes the most of the medium by giving the characters and narrative threads you love more room to breathe. That said, characters' ultimate fates remain largely unchanged, with even a few additional deaths along the way. You may hope against hope for it, but be assured that no one miraculously survives here. The world remains a bleak one, ravaged by the cordyceps brain infection, and mercifully the series writers know not to tip their hand too early when it comes to the infected. Early cold opens give viewers a wider, global view of the preamble to the pandemic, and horrifying visual flourishes unique to this adaptation show cordyceps as a terrifying force of nature. It's early on, when the infected are at their most human, that they are perhaps creepiest, and the most haunting frames of the entire series show how the fungus reaches out to grasp at humanity. But, of course, it's not a perfect organism. While much of what's been expanded upon is genuinely additive, there are episodes that leave us wishing the showrunners had shown a little restraint. A case in point would be the tragically fated brothers Henry and Sam. The major beats are broadly the same, but their tale has been expanded to be even more fraught. Worse still, the brothers are far from the only black characters whose suffering ultimately only serves to facilitate the growth of a white protagonist, namely the survivor's guilt of Ellie. This was arguably an issue in the original game too, but it hits like a train all over again here. A certain prepper nihilism is in vogue throughout the post-apocalyptic genre, and permeates the original game too. It sneers, "Why dare to hope for a better world? In the end, humans are only animals." The series is at its worst when it unquestioningly leans into this. But the moments when it dares to suggest a softer world remains possible decades into the Cordyceps pandemic are among its most affecting. Episode 3, depicting the relationship between Bill and Frank that we never got to see in-game, feels like a panacea for the genre fatigued. For much of the series, Joel can't bear to believe in a better world. He's still the gruff git you'll remember from the game, but pitch-perfect casting sees leading Mandalorian Pedro Pascal granting him much-needed depth and warmth through his performance. Pascal impresses most when Joel's walls finally begin to come down, but none of that can happen without Ellie. Another Game of Thrones alumnus, Bella Ramsey, brings Ellie's scrappiness wonderfully to the fore of their performance. Neither they nor the writing ever let you forget that Ellie is a young girl being shaped and molded by an exceptionally violent world. Ramsey and Pascal make for an excellent double act, and the dynamic is a consistent highlight. There definitely won't be a dry eye by the time Pascal finally utters, "It's okay, baby girl." Supported by these excellent performances, smart writing, and a massive budget, this will entice both newcomers and superfans alike. This faithful adaptation retains the original game's most divisive twists in addition to other issues besides, even as it introduces new elements to keep established fans guessing. Much of what it adds allows series faithfuls to appreciate what they already loved from a fresh angle, but that's not to say this is for die-hard survivalists only. To put it another way, as someone who isn't a huge fan of the game myself, this one definitely grew on me. This lavish production manages the impossible, presenting a faithful adaptation that expands on what fans love while offering an entry point for newcomers. The casting is perfect. In addition to the headliners, Anna Torv's take on Tess and Merle Dandridge's reprisal of Marlene stand out. The bleakness that turned many off the original game is present here. Divisive storytelling choices remain intact for better and worse.